1920s. A city alive with jazz, secrets, and shadows. In the glow of gas lamps, two lives crossed paths. One a young scholar with nothing but dreams. The other a daughter of wealth raised in silken cages. They were not supposed to meet. They were never meant to speak. But fate is careless with the rules of men. A glance, a pause too long, and something fragile began. Not in whispers spoken aloud, but in letters. Letters that carried the weight of longing, written in trembling ink. Each page became a world. Each word a rebellion against silence. But love in that era was dangerous. Eyes were always watching. Walls had ears. And families had power sharper than steel. Still they continued. Hidden exchanges. Stolen glances. A secret world built on paper and hope. But secrets cannot remain hidden forever. And when they are discovered, they do not simply break hearts. They rewrite destinies. The story begins in the restless air of the 1920s. London was alive with jazz, smoky cafes, and the scent of change after the Great War. Young men returned with scars, some visible, some hidden, and young women stepped into new roles, daring to dream beyond the traditions that bound their mothers. And in this shifting world, two paths crossed. He was a student of Cambridge University, not of noble birth, not wealthy, but brilliant and ambitious, carrying books the way soldiers once carried weapons, with purpose, with fire. Every evening he walked along the old courtyards, their stone walls soaked with centuries of whispered debates, secret loves and youthful dreams. She, in contrast, belonged to a world of privilege, the daughter of a powerful London banker. She moved through life with elegance expected of her class, pearls around her neck, lace gloves hiding nervous fingers, a chauffeur waiting at the corner to escort her home. Her world was polished, structured, and watched closely by eyes that measured every move of her family. They should never have met. And if they did, they should never have spoken. Yet fate often ignores the rules written by society. One autumn evening, under the arches of Cambridge's ancient library, they found themselves face to face. The rain tapped gently against stained glass windows, and the scent of ink and paper hung in the air. She had slipped into the library, escaping a reception she found unbearably dull. He had been there for hours, lost in pages of philosophy, unaware of time. For a moment silence hung between them, awkward yet electric. She asked for help reaching a book on the top shelf, her voice quiet, unsure if she should even speak. He, startled, almost dropped his own book, then smiled nervously as he handed it to her. The book was on poetry, Byron's verses bound in deep green leather. Their fingers brushed. It was brief, innocent, yet something stirred. In that instant, neither spoke of love, but both carried away an unshakable memory, an image that would return in quiet hours, when the world demanded they obey its rules. That night she returned to her father's mansion, chandeliers glittering above, music echoing in the ballroom. Her smile practiced for every guest. Yet her thoughts lingered in the dusty library, on the boy with ink on his hands and a fire in his eyes, and he back in his modest dormitory, lit only by a single lamp, tried to continue reading, but he could not. The sound of her voice, the brush of her hand, haunted him more than any verse on the page. Neither of them knew what awaited, but in that small moment a seed was planted, a seed that would grow in secret, watered by words hidden in letters, written in ink that time itself could not erase. The next days unfolded quietly as though nothing had happened. The world carried on with its noise. Trains rushed through London stations. Businessmen shouted across banks. Professors lectured endlessly in echoing halls. And yet, in two separate corners of that vast city, two young hearts carried a memory too powerful to silence. He returned often to the library, pretending to study but secretly hoping to catch a glimpse of her again. She too found excuses, slipping away from social gatherings, her polished shoes tapping lightly against the marble floors, until she found her way once more among the shelves. They never spoke for long. A glance, a whispered question about a book, a smile quickly hidden when others passed by. It was dangerous. Not because they broke the law, but because they defied expectations. A banker's daughter was meant to marry within her class. A Cambridge student of modest means was invisible in her world. But hearts rarely obey the rules written on ledgers, and so one evening when the risk grew too great, he did something bold. He left a note, folded neatly, slipped between the pages of the poetry book she had borrowed. A simple line written in hurried ink. If words can carry what I feel, perhaps letters will keep us safe. When she discovered it, her breath caught. Her world was one of strict eyes and measured steps, yet here, hidden between paper and ink, she was free. That night, under the glow of a single lamp in her father's grand house, she wrote back. Her handwriting was elegant, every curve shaped by years of refinement, but her words trembled with something new, something fragile, daring. The next day, the poetry book returned to the shelf, a reply tucked between its pages. And thus the letters began. Day after day, their words wove a secret world, a world where class did not matter, where a girl could dream of freedom, where a boy could believe he was worthy of more than ambition alone. The letters spoke of books, of music, of dreams beyond London's fog. Sometimes playful, sometimes serious, but always alive with a tenderness they dared not show in public. And with every exchange, their bond grew deeper. Ink replaced spoken words. Parchment replaced stolen glances. But even as their secret flourished, shadows gathered. Every page carried risk. Every letter could be discovered. And in the rigid world of 1920s society, discovery meant ruin. Yet still they wrote. For in their hidden words they found not only each other, but a truth worth more than all the wealth and power their worlds tried to offer. Weeks turned into months, and the secret letters grew in number. At first they were cautious, simple thoughts on books, favorite lines of poetry, brief reflections on music drifting through London's night cafes. But slowly the words deepened. Each letter became longer, filled with fragments of hearts that could not speak aloud. He wrote of ambition, of his dream to rise beyond circumstance, to make something of his name. She wrote of confinement, of a life lived under chandeliers, yet feeling like a cage of crystal and glass. They began to invent a language only they understood. Phrases borrowed from poets, metaphors woven into sentences that outsiders would dismiss as harmless, but which carried meanings that burned with emotion. Every meeting of their eyes in public was fleeting, a glance too brief to arouse suspicion, but when the letters arrived, slipped into books or passed quietly beneath tables, their hearts burst with words they could not say aloud. One letter spoke of longing. When I walk these streets, I feel them empty unless I imagine you beside me. Another answered in trembling ink, every song I hear in this house feels hollow, until I picture you hearing it too. The letters became their world. Ink on paper was safer than stolen kisses, yet the more they wrote, the stronger the danger grew. For in those words they admitted what society would never allow, that a banker's daughter had given her heart to a man with nothing but his mind and his dreams. The stakes were rising. A misplaced page, a curious glance, a servant too observant, any of these could end their fragile paradise. Still they could not stop. For in a world divided by class, suspicion, and silence, their letters were the only place where love could breathe freely. By the spring of 1922, their letters had multiplied into dozens, hidden carefully in books under loose floorboards, even sewn into the lining of Emily's diary. Each page carried their lives, their laughter, their pain, their secrets. But secrets have weight, and soon that weight began to press down on them. Emily's father, the stern banker, Mr. Whitmore, had begun to notice small changes. The way Emily excused herself after dinner, her sudden fondness for visiting the university library, her distracted gaze when wealthy suitors were introduced. To him these were signs of rebellion, dangerous hints that his daughter might not obey the path he had carved for her. One evening, as she sat at her writing desk by candlelight, Emily nearly made a fatal mistake. She had left one of Charles's letters unfolded beside her, its words glowing in the candle's flicker. "You are the only reason I rise each morning. Without you, these walls would be a prison." A knock at the door, sharp, sudden. Her maid entered to remind her that her father wished to see her. Emily's hands trembled as she snatched the letter, sliding it beneath a stack of music sheets just in time. Her heart raced. What if the maid had seen? What if the wrong eyes discovered the truth? Meanwhile, Charles faced dangers of his own. His roommate at Cambridge, a curious fellow student, once found him burning scraps of paper in the fireplace late at night. "Another essay gone wrong," he teased. Charles only smiled faintly, hiding the trembling in his voice. "Something like that." But the truth was darker. Every word he and Emily wrote could ruin them both. For her, it meant disgrace and being forced into a marriage of convenience. For him, it meant expulsion, perhaps even scandal that would haunt him forever. And yet, even with the risk pressing closer each day, they could not stop. One night, in a moment of desperation, Charles wrote, "If they discover us, let them. For I would rather be ruined with you than live safely without you." Emily read those words beneath the glow of her lamp, tears blurring the ink. Her reply was simple, but it sealed her fate. "Then ruin we shall face together." The letters had bound them. What began as whispers of affection was now a vow of defiance against the world. They were no longer just writing. They were fighting for the right to love, even in silence. But as the shadows grew longer, one question haunted them both. How long could their secret survive before someone else discovered the truth? Summer of 1922 arrived with warm evenings and restless nights. But for Emily and Charles, warmth did not bring peace, it brought pressure. Her father had grown impatient. Wealthy suitors visited the Whitmore home, men with polished shoes and sharper ambitions. They spoke of investments, estates, and fortunes. But Emily, though she smiled politely, felt nothing but emptiness inside. Each time she declined, her father's voice grew colder. "You are no longer a child. Emily, you will marry not for love but for legacy." Meanwhile, Charles felt the weight of distance pressing harder than ever. Their meetings had grown rare. Too many watchful eyes. Too many questions left unanswered. And so their letters became desperate, ink smudged by tears, words rushed with trembling hands. Charles begged her to wait. Emily begged him not to give up. But fate has a way of testing even the strongest hearts. One evening, as Emily prepared to slip a letter into the pocket of a trusted servant, her father entered unexpectedly. For the briefest second, his eyes fell upon the folded paper in her hand. She froze. "What is that?" he demanded. Emily stammered, fumbling for words. "It is poetry, father. A draft I was writing." But suspicion had been planted, and suspicion is more dangerous than proof. That night, Emily cried into her pillow, clutching Charles's latest words. "If they try to take you from me, I will not surrender. We are more than their rules." Yet even as she clung to hope, a storm was building. Whispers began among servants. Rumors crept through corridors. And one name, a name that should have been a secret, slipped where it did not belong. At Cambridge, Charles felt it too. A professor asked him why he seemed distracted. A fellow student joked about secret loves. The walls were closing in. "Still," he wrote. "Still," she answered. But with each letter they sensed it, the walls tightening, the trap closing. Their love had carried them this far, but the breaking point was near. The next mistake would not be forgiven. The autumn of 1922 was colder than most. Leaves fell in golden silence over London, but in Emily's heart the world was trembling. The day she had feared finally arrived. Her father confronted her with words sharper than any blade. "I know of him. This ends now," she pleaded, but her tears only hardened his resolve. "You are a Whitmore. You will not shame this family." That night Emily was locked inside her own home, watched carefully, her movements measured, her letters confiscated. The chain of words that had bound two hearts together was broken. At Cambridge, Charles waited in vain. Each day he returned to the quiet corner of the library, expecting a folded page slipped into his hand, a sign, a whisper. But none came. Days became weeks. Silence became a prison. He wrote, but his letters never reached her. She wrote, but her pages never left the house. And so, the love that had burned so fiercely was smothered by silence. But fate, cruel as it was, left them one final gift. On the eve of her forced engagement, Emily bribed a servant with the last of her precious jewelry. That night, Charles received a single envelope, creased, rushed, ink blotched with tears. Her words were brief but eternal. "They may lock me away, but my heart has already chosen. Whatever the world says, I am yours." Charles never saw her again, but he carried that letter for the rest of his life, folded neatly inside a worn leather book. Through years of teaching, through decades of silence, through the long loneliness of time, it remained with him. And when he died, long after Emily's name had faded from society's memory, the letter was found, its ink faded, but its love undimmed. Historians preserved it. Readers marveled at it. And though their voices never returned, their words lived on. Two hearts silenced by the world, yet remembered by eternity. Not through wealth, not through power, but through ink and paper and love that refused to vanish. Dear friends, what you just heard is only one of many secrets time has hidden. Join loading, and together we'll unlock more real stories of the past. Don't miss what history never wanted you to remember.